And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another episode of the Assembly Call. As tonight, the Indiana Hoosiers lose 70-50 to the Michigan State Spartans. And if that score doesn't really sound that bad, that means you probably watched this game. Because frankly, it's a game that felt worse than the final score indicated. This was a game that Michigan State led 36-17 at the half. Again, it felt worse than that having watched it. Uh, I tweeted out early in the first half that this game looked like a bunch of men playing basketball against a bunch of boys. Michigan State's pressure defense just took Indiana completely out of everything they wanted to do offensively. The Spartans went on a big run early, and Indiana was never able to recover. We'll give you all the horrible numbers, the shooting numbers, all that stuff, but really what it came down to tonight is that one team came out ready to kick somebody's ass on their home floor, and the team they're playing came out to get their ass kicked on somebody's home floor, and that's exactly what happened. And we'll break it down. We'll talk about some of the particulars, but ultimately this is just a game that hopefully we can file away, look back on at the end of the season as the low point of the year, the biggest ass kicking, the worst game, hopefully something that we can learn from. But certainly there aren't going to be a whole lot of positives to take out of tonight, but for the next half hour, 45 minutes, or I don't know, maybe 10 minutes, maybe we'll all just get fed up, say our opening statements, and leave. We'll break down the carnage that was seen tonight at the Breslin Center. I'm your host on the Assembly Call, Jerod Morris. I will be joined by our usual team. Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips are all here, and of course you're here. And if you have any questions or comments, tweet them to us with the hashtag Assembly Call. You can go to the YouTube chat and put in your comments there. I don't know. It seems weird to do a banner moment on a night like tonight when Indiana really played so poorly. And of course, I try to do that so that every game, even the bad ones, you try and find a positive. And, I suppose really the positive tonight was Yogi. Yogi came out. I thought he was the one guy on Indiana's team who, at least from the opening tip to the end, came to compete in a basketball game. I'm not sure his teammates really came to do that. A few of them played well in spurts, but Yogi, I thought, was really the only guy out there consistently competing. And he scored 17 points. He had 3 assists. He had 3 boards. He was 6 of 16, 3 of 10 from downtown. So the offensive woes plagued him, almost as much as everybody else. But at least he was out there trying to give the team a spark. But as we've seen this year, when Yogi has 17 of our 50 points, that was a ratio we saw too often last year, and that hasn't been a recipe for success this year. So kudos, a hat tip to Yogi for trying to lead this team, for doing his best to compete. But unfortunately, there were so many other no-shows that it simply didn't matter. So with that said, that's my opening thought. Let's go around the horn here, hear from Andy and Ryan. Andy, we will start with you and get your bottoms line on tonight's IU loss.
Well, it sounds like arguably the best thing for me was that my daughter had basketball practice, so I didn't actually watch the first half. So I've got that going for me, which is
You're lucky.
which is good. If it mysteriously disappears from my DVR, I'll know nothing about it.
Hey, on the bright side, you saw about as much of the first half as Troy and Hunter did. So
it's good. It's good. We'll compare notes.
We got jokes tonight.
I got So between the update I got from you and my wife when I walked in the door, it seemed like it was pretty bad. I looked at the halftime stats. The 3-point shooting was obviously really poor, and I'm sure we'll get into a lot of those things. To me, it was interesting to look and see how this team might handle a bit of prosperity is probably too strong a word, but coming off a really big road win, how they would react going into a tough environment, and it felt like. At least you kind of look through some of the numbers, and particularly the first half. I don't know that I put a lot of stock in the second half. The part that it wasn't very long before the lead was up to 30, and then I felt like Michigan State took their foot off the gas a little bit and probably could have won by more. But in the parts of the game that really mattered, virtually all of the bad things that can happen to IU happened. They shot really poorly from 3-point range, which seems to be, based on what I've been able to gather, a mix of missing shots, but also taking poor shots. They got hammered on the glass. I think Michigan State had 26 rebounds total at halftime, if I remember that correctly, and a lot of those on the offensive end. And then just generally defensive awareness. Certainly in the parts that I saw, I think the communication on defense continues to be a problem. Hartman is a guy who, when you see him out there, I think he pretty routinely is has a good awareness and pointing out where guys should be, but you don't see that too much from other guys. And there was limited resistance in the parts that I saw. So really, the only thing that the kind of recent bugaboo for IU has been turnovers, and that was something that they've done better with this year, and certainly did better with tonight, only having 6. I think you said before we came on, only on 10% of the possessions. Now I know Ryan has a different take on what maybe should or shouldn't count as a turnover, but nearly everything that could go wrong for IU went wrong tonight, and I don't know what else you take away from this game other than when this team's flaws are exposed and its limitations are on display, this is certainly a possibility to see happen. Now they could just as easily come back over the weekend and play really well against Ohio State, but I think this was kind of a maybe not an absolute worst case scenario because no one was injured during the game, but I think this was, if you made a list of give me all the things that could go wrong for IU to look pretty bad, I think nearly all of them seemed to happen tonight.
Ryan, since most games Indiana wins before we do the show, a lot of times it seems odd to come on here and introduce your first segment as a rant. Tonight it fits. Rant away.
Yeah, I think that was an all-time gag burger from Indiana tonight. I mean, look, nobody wants to play Michigan State at Michigan State coming off a loss. Nobody in this country, I don't care if it's Kentucky right now, nobody wants to play Michigan State. And we saw why tonight. They were focused, they were intense, they were amazing defensively. I mean, they did everything right, and Indiana did everything to fall into those traps, to try and go too fast, try and hurry shots, try and, at times where they should have moved it faster, gone too slow. I mean, they basically hit all of the wrong notes. I mean, it's like a bad night at karaoke. It's just awful, and so I just think it's one of those things where this game, I mean, I don't think we really learned that much. I think it's almost like one of those early season games where we blew teams out. You don't really learn much about the team because they just went as bad as you could possibly go. And it's contagious, and that kind of stuff, a collapse like this is completely contagious. Everybody got sucked into it. You saw guys, it wasn't just the freshmen, it was leaders, guys who have experience like Troy and Honor and guys like that just playing poorly. I think Yogi played poorly in stretches, but wound up in the second half being really the only guy we could rely on. And so, getting back to the turnover thing, as Andy said, I have a different idea of what turnovers should be. I think bad shots should count as turnovers too. And if that was the case, 2/3 of our possessions would have ended in turnovers tonight. So, because I think that's just as bad as a bad turnover, is taking a horrible shot early in the shot clock or, running the clock down to the end of the shot clock and just firing something up. That's as bad as a shot clock violation to me, to just throw something up. So, it was just a horrible night, and there's really not much to say about it. Everything went wrong, and we saw this team exposed as really fragile in certain situations. So how they bounce back will be more telling than how they played tonight, in my opinion.
Yeah, this is a game where the immortal words of Lloyd Christmas ring loudly in your ears. Our pets' heads are falling off, because that's really what it felt like. So, Ryan, you said
I got to say something. There's only 2 positives about tonight that I can think of. And Andy, he said that nobody got injured. Well, nobody died either, so that's a good one. And my mom made chili. So really, those are the only 2 positive things I can say about tonight.
This show is starting off about as well as Indiana's game against Michigan State did tonight. So, Ryan, you said something interesting there, and I want to hit on it because this is what a lot of people were talking about on Twitter, and I think it's interesting after a game like this. You said you're not sure how much you learned from a game like tonight. And I think I could very easily play the devil's advocate there and say maybe we learned more about this team tonight than we've learned about them all year, because it's their first, it's the second true road game, obviously, and it's their first road game against a really good team in Michigan State. And when we got punched in the mouth, we got punched in the mouth against Nebraska. We came back, we rebounded, we won that game. And I really thought that was a sign of things to come, that this team had a different type of toughness, and combined with the talent level, they'd be able to compete in games like tonight. I'm not sure that Indiana, even at their best tonight, was going to beat this Michigan State team or even come within 6-7 points. Because like you said, part of what happened tonight was Michigan State. They played great. They came out to kick ass. We just didn't come out to put up a fight. And so in a game like this, where it's not like we've played a whole lot of top 25 competition, couldn't you make the argument that you learn more from a game like this than we have in a lot of the other games? Or are you just going to write this off and say that what we saw over the first 14 games is a more accurate depiction of this team. And, sometimes you just have to write off your worst performance of the season, and hopefully this is that.
Yeah, like I said, I think we'll find out that answer next game, because you really can't know right now what this means. I mean, does it mean that they're just going to fall on their face and all Big Ten play? I mean, I tend to not think that, but I mean, yeah, I'm not saying this is encouraging. I just think that there were a lot of factors going into it. Like you said, first big time road game for a lot of these guys, playing Michigan State, one of the toughest places to play on the road against a guy who I think is the best coach in all of college basketball, and a veteran tough team coming off a loss. I think you're right. I don't think there was any way we were going to win this game, and we played right into their hands, which is a negative. And if next game against Ohio State we come out and are completely flat and get blown off the floor, then yeah, we learned a lot tonight. But I think that it's going to take some time to really figure out what this means. Does this just mean that whoever was in front of Michigan State was going to get blown off that floor tonight? I don't know, but I certainly think that they saw a young team coming in without a whole lot of experience and saw a really great way to take advantage of that, and they did. They outmanned IU in every phase of the game, outmuscled them, out-toughed them, everything. And no matter how hard these guys were trying, I mean, it wasn't a problem of effort for Indiana. It was a problem of just mental strength. They just, no matter how hard they tried, nothing would work. And I think that you're right that, yeah, they would have lost this game even with a guy like Noah Vonleh or, with a more of a post presence or anything. I don't think that would have mattered tonight. I really don't. And so we'll see. We have to see how they come out against Ohio State. If this had happened against, let's say, Iowa or Minnesota or Northwestern or someone like, a lower tier team, in my opinion, somebody who's a lower tier team, then yeah, that's really concerning. But this is Michigan State, and this is what Michigan State does to people.
I mean, Andy, how concerned are you after a game like this? Because I kind of look at it and feel a game like this, I don't look at it and say, oh, crap, it's going to be like last year all over again. But it does kind of dampen my excitement about what this team's ceiling may be. Those images of 13-5 or 14-4 in the conference that I dared to dream about after the Nebraska game, you kind of start to be a little more realistic about that. And Ryan's shaking my head. Hey, I'm an optimist. What do you want from me? But a game like this, it is a little bit of a smack of reality that says, hey, this is still a young team with challenges, with inconsistencies. Buckle up. It's going to be a bumpy ride.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I tend to fall more on that side of things. I don't know that any, outside of, maybe some of the mental aspect of the game that touched on a little bit, I mean, there aren't any weaknesses that were exposed tonight that we didn't already know about. Now, they might have been exaggerated a little bit tonight by how well Michigan State played. I mean, they almost doubled up IU on the glass, 50-28, if the ESPN box score is correct. They had just as many defensive rebounds as IU had offensive rebounds. Or, no, they had just as many offensive rebounds as IU had defensive rebounds. And really just kind of own that part. I would imagine the points in the paint were pretty lopsided, and IU shot the ball incredibly poorly and didn't seem to get a lot of good shots. And so I think you look at some of these things with, playing against tougher teams and how this team can still run its offense and kind of impose its will. And to me, those are concerns that existed already, and they didn't necessarily go away with the Nebraska game, and they certainly didn't go away tonight. I don't know that they're worse than we thought, but I think probably as I look over, some of the stats, and looking at guys like Hunter and Troy, who coming off of, Troy's had a really good, handful of games here. Hunter came off of arguably his best game at IU, and this was his response to that. It seemed like he got in foul trouble early from what I could gather. Didn't really play all that well. Got benched to start the second half. Didn't really do much when he was in there. And then Troy, I think, got yanked at some point after, I think, a transition three where he just didn't really make an effort to get out on a shooter and things like that. To me, that probably more so than getting beat and getting hammered on the glass and not shooting the ball well, like those are things that concern me more than just losing, and even losing by 20 is it felt like those guys had taken a step forward even in losses where they had been able to play well, and tonight they really just didn't show up at all. And this team becomes so one-dimensional without those guys playing well, and that one dimension tonight was atrocious. So I think all that added together was pretty bad. So if there's anything that I'm most concerned about, it's those guys' ability to play against tougher teams who are really going to challenge them physically and athletically, because as much as Nebraska has improved, they're not really matches for them from an athletic standpoint. They don't have a lot of big guys inside. Pitchford would rather play on the perimeter and isn't a great interior defender, and they really don't have a great matchup for Troy either. So you start to look at that, and you look down some of these other teams in the Big Ten, and you think, okay, well, is that really the thing to be concerned about? So for me, that's what I take away more than kind of the stats that might jump out and hit you in the face. It's more of the performance of those guys.
Yeah, I mean, and this is a game where the thing, like you pointed out, the things Indiana had been doing well to play better lately, all reversed. I mean, the rebounding, I think we've out-rebounded our last 4 opponents coming into this game, got blasted on the glass by Michigan State. Of course, a great rebounding team, but still, to not even compete. And then, Troy and Hunter have been playing so well since that Louisville game. And, those guys today, to be the only 2 guys who played who didn't score, I mean, sometimes the plus-minus does not give you an accurate picture of what happened in a game, but Troy's team worst, minus 28, really tells a big part of the story tonight, because when you look at some of the contributions we got from other guys, if you add in what you expect from Troy and from Hunter reasonably based on what they've been doing, a 20-point deficit gets a lot closer real quick. But, I mean, Seth Davis really summed it up with one question in the second half. He said, is Troy Williams even in the building? And as someone who's been beating the, Troy Williams is an all Big Ten player drum as loudly as anybody, this is a game that really disappoints me, because I think what Troy's done so well is just play hard, give effort, really try out there. And I didn't see that from him tonight. And I get, that you get frustrated sometimes when teams are really D'ing you up and the things that you've been doing aren't working. We had that one drive in the second half where he drove, penetrated, got it to Yogi, and it looked like our normal offense. But that was the only time that happened. And, so Ryan, I want to get your take on these 2 guys, because so much of Indiana's improvement has been based on, Troy seeming like he's ready to take that next step and Hunter seeming like he's ready to take that next step. And like Andy said, it seemed like a step back for both of them. And perhaps it's the opponent, perhaps it's the location, maybe they have a stomach virus we don't know about, like who knows. It almost seems inexplicable, though, for them to play this bad after really playing so well in recent games.
The biggest difference for those guys over the last few weeks was that they were playing smarter. It had nothing to do with, finally getting into the lane and making layups or anything like that, because that's stuff they've had the opportunity to do. They were picking their spots, and they were playing smarter and more within themselves and within the offense. And when things go poorly, a lot of guys, Yogi isn't one of them. Yogi is one of the guys who sticks with it, but a lot of guys, including those 2, try to either make something happen on their own or just give up. And I don't think it's a conscious, like, well, this game's over, I'm giving up. I think it's like, oh, well, I can't do anything, and give it to somebody else, in an attempt to make something happen. But the problem is, when you're down like that, what you have to do is stick even closer to the plan. Even if it's not working, you stick closer to the offense you run. You stick closer and you run through those things, and you dribble and you pass and you move the ball, even if it's not getting it done, because eventually you'll break through. And like you said, the one time Troy did what he was supposed to do, he drove into the middle of the floor, kicked it out, and Yogi hit a 3, and it was perfect. And and the announcers even said that's something we didn't see all first half. And so what I would like to see out of Hunter and Troy next game is just being smarter with the ball. And, when you do get it, don't just turn around and throw up a shot. Make sure you've got something and not just force something to force something, because that's when you get to playing the worst, because you'll miss that shot. The other team's going to take it, push it up the floor, and you could turn what could have been an easy 2 points into a 4-point turnaround the other way. And then you're back down on offense trying to do the same thing over again. So I think the key is, they've got to both realize what they do well and what they don't, and play smarter. And tonight was a complete reversal over the last few weeks. And hopefully them getting smacked in the mouth tonight will be like what happened against Louisville. And they'll turn it around, and they'll shorten their games up and be smarter about it. Now, it may not happen. Maybe that was a one-time thing. But after that Louisville game, they both played much better.
They did, and that's what we have to hope for. And Tom Crean has been given a lot of credit for how Indiana rebounded from that Louisville game, and that's why I'm really interested to see what happens with this team next. That game against Ohio State on Saturday at home will be a big test. I mean, and clearly Indiana's going to need more from these two guys. Andy, Tom Crean's obviously getting a lot of criticism. He's going to anytime your team comes out and just kind of doesn't compete and gets their butt kicked like this, the coach is going to get some criticism. But, a lot of times he's been criticized for not using the bench to send a message. Tonight he did that. I mean, Hunter didn't play well and only played 10 minutes. Troy didn't play well, only played 17 minutes. Both guys sat the bench to start the second half, something we're starting to see a little bit more from Tom this year. And you could see the frustration on his face. When he tried and call timeouts, like just nothing was working. How much do you pin on a coach for an individual just horrid 40 minutes like this, or is the real story going to be told from how the team bounces back, and if they can string together 3 or 4 good performances after this, like they were able to after the Louisville game?
This feels like leading the witness, since I heard what you said after the Nebraska game, that I would be on to make some comment about his substitution patterns or something. So, I don't know, because I feel like the part of the game that really mattered, I really didn't see. One thing I was going to ask you was what adjustments you saw, because that's the one thing that I always look at, and that's the one thing that I do, often criticize. Although I thought during that Nebraska game, I thought he made some good ones. Did you really feel like there were any attempt to make adjustments in terms of how IU was attacking offensively, what they were doing defensively, between the first half and then coming out of halftime?
I didn't really. I mean, I think, and Ryan can chime in if you saw something different. Kind of like you said, Andy, the story of this game was told in the first half, and I didn't see anything real noticeable there in the second half, that you could see. I mean, Indiana tried to drive more to start the second half. They tried to, but, the second half opened with 2 bricks from 3 by James Blackman Jr. and Robert Johnson. So what they tried to do and the eventual result in terms of the shot really didn't make much of a difference. And then it just seemed to me like since Indiana wasn't able to make a run in those first 5 to 10 minutes, it kind of looked like 2 teams playing out the string after that. So I didn't see any real noticeable adjustments, Ryan. Did you notice anything that jumped, except for benching the guys to start the second half?
Yeah, and he threw in Emmett Holt for a long stretch. He threw in Max Holtzel in the first half. We haven't seen Max Holtzel play significant first half minutes, I don't think, this year. He's mostly gotten in the second half. He played a lot. I mean, he was going for anybody off that bench. And
Max competed. I thought Max actually played some pretty good minutes in there.
He was outmanned. Obviously, I mean, he's just not physically there yet to compete with a team like Michigan State. He needs to put some weight on and things like that. But yeah, he was in there and scrapping and trying. But what we did, and I think what he kept doing when he used 3 timeouts in the first half. When was the last time we saw that? He only had 2 left in the second half. We haven't seen Crean do that, I don't think, since he's been here. And each time we take a timeout, you could tell exactly what he told them. He's like, keep moving the ball and keep driving. And they would try to do that coming out of the timeout, and it was guys just didn't have confidence in themselves, and it was so clear, because you'd see somebody get the ball on a wing, one-on-one, and you just drive into the paint and kick it if you can't score. And they would drive 2 dribbles, not even try, kick it back out. There was just no confidence anywhere on the floor. And so no matter what he tried to do, it just seemed like the team had a defeatist attitude after the first 10 minutes or so. I mean, they made a little run to get it back to about 9, early in the first half. But yeah, that's partially on him too, to get these guys believing in themselves. But I just felt like no matter what he did, it just seemed like the team played the same way. We changed defenses about 4 times in that first half, and the results never changed. They were getting wide open looks. Guys were running around in circles, just losing their focus and things like that. And, they fell for every trick that Michigan State threw at them.
Yeah, and there was just a lot of aimless dribbling too, and not enough movement of the ball with smart passes. So it's weird because you say the team needed to attack more, and they did, but it wasn't that they didn't dribble. They just had a lot of aimless dribbling away from the basket that wasn't really pressuring the defense. Right? It's like they were afraid to really cut into the teeth of the defense, and where they have been so good at penetrating, drawing guys, and dishing. And yeah, and the other thing is, early in the first half, they got a few decent looks from 3 early. Now they rushed them. It looked like Michigan State had them playing about a half step faster, so they rushed the shots. And there were a couple times when Indiana tried to run sets. And, there was one possession I think I tweeted that it was the worst offensive possession in the history of basketball because they tried to set it up, and it literally, with 12 seconds left on the shot clock, they still hadn't gotten into the set. Troy had just dribbled 35 feet from the basket, to taking the shot clock down to 12 seconds, and Creighton calls a timeout. And then out of the timeout, we come, Yogi one dribble bricks a three. I mean, and that was just kind of what the night was like. Nothing we tried worked. The normal offense didn't work. So. And I just don't know really what there was to do much in the second half because it was still the same guys with the same kind of lack of confidence and being a step slow when they needed to be faster and a step fast when they needed to slow it down. Like it was just that kind of off-kilter offensive game all night. And Ryan, you want to talk about shooting because obviously Indiana's shooting woes are a big story tonight. We said live by the three, die by the three a lot, and tonight Indiana died by the three, 5 of 24. And is there anything that you're saying that kind of explains such a poor shooting night, or do we just chalk that up to a bad night, law of averages, catching a team that's shot really well?
No, there were a lot of things going on that were evident early on. One thing is when you get first of all, people often think a shot is just the release. I mean, it's a complicated mechanism of jump, get your arm, get square, jump, and then the release mechanism. And it's complicated, and if you knock one piece of that out of whack, your shot's not going to go in. I mean, you might rattle one in randomly, but it's not going to go in consistently. Tonight, I saw Indiana playing with clearly overly jazzed at the beginning of the game with adrenaline. They were jumping higher than they usually do. They were, over-rotating on their shots. When they shoot it up, you'd see their shoulders rotate. And some guys were just not set. They would just fire the ball no matter where their feet were. They weren't necessarily squared up to the basket. And what happens is if you miss a few, then you start thinking, okay, I need to do this to adjust my shot because it's wrong. And you over-adjust, you overcompensate, and you see a guy like James Blackman go 1 of 14, which he did tonight. You see, he was 0 of 5 from 3. Yogi was 3 of 10. I mean, these guys were just overthinking everything. The way your shot goes down is when you're comfortable. And Nick Zeisloft is the biggest example of this. He has been so off in the last 4 or 5 games. And tonight he went 1 of 6, and he had 3 or 4 really good looks. And the problem with Nick is right now, he's not squaring himself to the basket. His right foot is closer to the basket than his left foot. When he jumps, therefore, his shoulders aren't square. They're square with his feet. And so he's jumping with his upper body not fully square to the basket, and he's going to miss shots. I mean, that's something that I'm sure he's aware of, but whatever he's got going on, it's a bad habit, and his feet are not set. He's not square. He's not regular. And then the shot tonight, he had one that went down. It was the only one he squared up on. I texted you about it, Jerod, and it was the one where he got fouled and it went in, and it was the only time he was square to the basket all night when he shot. We can't afford to have Nick Zeisloft not hitting threes. I mean, he's a solid leader on the floor. He plays okay defense, but we have him for his shooting ability. If he's going 1 of 6, which he has been lately, he has not been good lately, then you almost can't have him on the floor because he doesn't add that much else. So when guys like him and Blackman and Robert Johnson are missing wide open threes, there's a reason. It's not just, whether it's nerves, lack of confidence, whatever. It's throwing their shots off. And those guys, when they get back to Bloomington, should all be in Cook Hall all night working on that because, quite frankly, they need that to win. And tonight it was atrocious.
I'm going to stretch here to find a positive in a really horrid night for James Blackman Jr., one that he's going to want to forget. He did still rebound. He had 6 boards. But, you look at a night like tonight, he made his free throws 6 for 6. He's 0 of 5 from downtown. He's 1 of 14 from the field. But he's one guy who did continue to try, to kind of drive and create some offense when other guys were struggling. I kind of look at a night like tonight, where his shot's just not falling, and he's kind of, been renowned for his high shooting percentage and how well he's shooting. He sure as heck wasn't out there protecting his shooting percentage tonight. And I kind of think that a freshman like that, in a game like this that went so bad, there's something about his mentality I like. And it certainly didn't, provide any positive benefits in tonight's game. But, for him to I guess not lose his offensive confidence, to still believe that next one's going down, that he's going to, be able to go out there and get that next bucket. I think that serves him well in the long term, even if it shot Indiana into a hole tonight. Total BS after a bad loss, or do you buy into that some?
I'll I do agree that he kept competing, and I think that if he was having that bad a night and he was an upperclassman, you probably see him get yanked like Troy and Hunter. But as a freshman, you got to let him work through that because we need him. I also want to talk about Robert Johnson real quickly. He was having a horrible first half. He was awful in the first half, and I thought he got taken out a few times in the second half. And Crean had talked to him a few times specifically. They showed it on camera, and he came out and something clicked with him late in the second half. And I know Michigan State was just playing out the string at that point, but he started attacking and he started having confidence again. And I hope that can build to something else. I mean, I hope maybe we see him against Ohio State coming out with a little fire, because he was a guy late in the game I thought really picked it up regardless of the score and just started playing like we expect him to play, like he was playing earlier in the season. And like a light went on that had been off for a few weeks. And I hope that that's a sign of things to come. As for Blackman, I mean, with how talented that guy is, he could come out against Ohio State, hit 7 of 8 threes, and score 30 points. We know that. I mean, he's completely capable of that. So, yeah, I mean, he's going to have nights where he struggles like this because he's a freshman. The key is learning something from it. And we may not learn anything from this game, but those guys can definitely learn something about themselves and watch the tape and let it sink in and hurt a little, and hopefully, they won't let themselves get there again.
Ironically, on Indiana's worst shooting night of the year, Stan Robinson made a jump shot, so it wasn't all bad.
Okay, was it me, or did he make that left-handed?
Yeah, I think he did make it left-handed.
Yeah, I think he was.
I saw a few people tweet that it looked like he was going back to his left hand.
Yeah, and
he's running out of options. I mean, the right clearly wasn't working. I mean, you've only got a couple choices, so you may as well.
It's going to
be like an Air Bud situation where he's like shooting with his face. I don't know. But.
Yeah, he's going to start juggling like a soccer player and kick it into the hoop.
Okay. I'm gonna make a statement here. It's never a good thing when there are Space Jam and Air Bud references during an IU road game. The Space Jam thing happened during the broadcast. Andy's quoting Air Bud. We got to wrap this show up soon. It's nothing else.
There's not one sport that they didn't make some kind of Air Bud movie out of. It might be the greatest athlete of our generation. We can't say for sure.
Andy Bottoms and Seth Davis. Peas in the pod, man. Peas in the pod.
So, Andy, real quick, before we get your preview of Ohio State and then we wrap this thing up, Seth Davis now is doing Big Ten Network games, apparently. I did not realize this until tonight. To kind of sum up his broadcast evening, he started out the game talking about Indiana's uncommon maturity, to quote him. I appreciate Seth because he ranked Indiana 23rd in his AP poll, one of the few guys to give us votes, so thank you for that. But now I wonder if he's even seen us play. He even mentioned how, James Blackman Jr.'s feet kind of kick out when he shoots. Not sure he's ever seen James Blackman Jr. shoot before. But he talked about Indiana's uncommon maturity, and then probably about 15 minutes later was talking about how Indiana's confidence is so shaken and how can they ever bounce back from this. So, kind of an uneven night from Seth Davis on the telecast. And again, I wonder if he'd seen 20 minutes of IU basketball before tonight's game. But that's neither here nor there. Just want to throw that out there now that he's carpetbagging on the Big Ten Network. Andy Bottoms, over to you. This Ohio State team that Indiana's playing on Saturday, I feel like of all the top 25 teams, there seems to be they seem to be the team that everybody's like, we don't really know how good this team is because their schedule has stunk. They've got some young guys playing. So, they're 1-1. They lost to Iowa to open the Big Ten season. They beat Illinois. What do we know about this team, and what kind of chance do you give Indiana to rebound against them on Saturday?
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely a team that I don't think anybody has a really good handle on at this point. I think, in large part, they've gotten a bit of a pass because of Thad Matta's track record, which is reasonable, I would say. But they really went out and played next to no one in the non-conference. They played Louisville as part of the Big Ten ACC Challenge and lost by 9 at Louisville. That game was really, they were getting blown out for a while, and they got back in it. They also played North Carolina on a neutral floor, lost by 8 there, and then they lost their Big Ten opener at home to Iowa, and really didn't play too well throughout in that one. The thing that I'll be interested to watch in that one is defensively. So we've all gotten pretty used to Ohio State being really strong defensively these last few seasons, and based on depth, a little bit of a lack of height. I'm not exactly sure why, but Thad Matta's played a lot more zone this year, much to the chagrin of a lot of Ohio State fans, and it seemed like he scrapped that partway through the first half against Illinois, and they ended up creating a bunch of turnovers. And as they went to man. Now, given how IU's played against zones, no matter how bad people think their zone might be, it's probably something he'll at least wheel out for some possessions here and there against IU. But I'll be curious to see how they choose to defend, IU. And in terms of, offense, they've shot the ball really well, but I think to a certain extent, they're top 10 in both 3-point and 2-point percentage. But that probably has a lot to do with playing a number of teams that are outside the top 200 in KenPom. So they pretty much took IU's preseason schedule from last year and apparently just signed up for it this year and have moved forward from there. So they're definitely a team that is pretty tough to get a read on. They've got a few guys who have been around for a while. Shannon Scott, I think, maybe his 8th year of eligibility is there. Sam Thompson's still there. But they've also got a really good freshman, D'Angelo Russell, who played really well against a lot of the bad teams on their schedule and has struggled a bit more as the competition's ramped up. So be interested to see, what they can get out of him. So I think should be a really entertaining game because they've also really upped the tempo. Their average possession length on KenPom is the 5th shortest, and I'm pretty sure IU's is not terribly far behind. So currently KenPom projecting an 81-80 score. So it should at least have a bit more scoring than tonight's game. A lot of up and down, which hopefully plays to IU's strength, and as long as they can get back in transition defense and at least limit easy baskets there. So I think it should be an entertaining game, probably like most of these Big Ten games outside of ones Wisconsin is involved in. Is probably a coin flip, but I'd like to give IU the edge at home. Certainly be interesting to see how they bounce back from this, although good that they get, because of this kind of odd Monday game, they get a extra day or two almost, it feels like, to bounce back. And then Ohio State, I think, plays at Minnesota tomorrow or Wednesday, so they'll be coming off a road trip. I think some of their first, outside of that Louisville game, I think I guess what will be their second and third true road games, because they played their first 2 Big Ten games at home. So should be pretty even matchup. I think a little bit different kind of Ohio State team than we've probably become used to. In a game, I think, as we look at the Big Ten, evenly matched enough that not a game IU can afford to lose at home. We talked about road wins being so critical. Getting the one against Nebraska was great. This is definitely one where you got to hold serve at home.
So the only thing that operated less effectively than Indiana's offense tonight was Twitter. In fact, as we sit here talking, like 45 minutes after the game, mid-game tweets are just now popping up on my stream, and I missed this from Doc Libby, Yogi's mom. Seth Davis at one point, I think it was Seth, maybe it was the play-by-play guy, talked about how Yogi kind of crunched himself up to be small, and Doc Libby says, Yogi doesn't have to crunch himself up to be small, he's just small, LOL. So this is the kind of game where even players' moms had jokes. So, we all get through the games in our own way, and we love Doc Libby. I don't know if she's watching tonight. She may have been a little too fed up to deal with any pregame festivities, but if you are watching, funny line there. Oh, and we have a couple comments. I didn't want to bring these in. Some of them are kind of more comments than questions, really. Pam Hegner, longtime listener who we appreciate so much, says, I'm exhausted by this team. They're like a bad boyfriend who keeps jerking you around and yet you can't leave. I think we all kind of feel like that about Indiana basketball sometimes. Although I think maybe the memory of last year is sinking in a little bit. I wouldn't call this team that yet. Although if there's any more nights like tonight, maybe you can say that, Ryan.
Yeah, unfortunately, my diploma says I can't quit them. So it's not like a choice to check out at any point.
Yeah. Let's see. We got another comment here from Brian Ritter. Says, in a game like this, why not use Mascarpre and Holt together, or let Priller and April get in and foul to stop some baskets? When you're at Michigan State and you're legitimately asking questions about Priller and April playing, probably a sign things didn't really go your way, which was certainly tonight. Actually, we got a couple other, kind of interesting comments here, and I just missed them. My apologies for that. Balcony Seat says maybe overreacting, but at what point do these kinds of losses in 7th season, I think he means season 7 of the Tom Crean era, start to affect the trajectory of the program? Is it indicative? And we're getting a lot of those. From Lee Compson, lackadaisical seems to sum up tonight well, especially Williams and Honor. Shots will fall, but effort needed. And I did think that the effort kind of came and went. You're going to see that in a game like tonight. So, just some kind of thoughts, some comments there to lead us into final thoughts. It's, I think the key is not to overreact about a game like tonight. It's bad, and perhaps what a game like this does, if we all overreacted to the Nebraska game a little bit, 1-0, winning on the road, thinking this team is a little better than it was, this game kind of brings it back, and it's just that old sports lesson of things are never quite as good as they seem when you win and never quite as bad as they seem when you lose. I think it's important to remember things probably aren't quite as bad as they seem right now. Ryan, you wanted to mention a tweet? You're muted.
Yeah, sorry. Cody Zeller just tweeted something about has nothing to do with this game, but it made me laugh, so that's a positive. He says, "Is it too early to pick a winner in tonight's battle for Zeller supremacy, which is hashtagged?" He had 18 points, his brother had 2, and they were playing each other. So
see, I don't know if that's the Big Handsome. I don't think that's actually Cody's Twitter account.
Oh,
I think he's actually Cody Zeller.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, whatever.
But it's a valid question that he asks. Yeah, it's a valid question that he asks. In fact, Cody's last tweet is, "Realistically, is anyone in America cheering for Winston and Florida State?" So he's got some hot sports opinions there from Charlotte. Anyway, we've gone off the rails, much like the Hoosiers tonight. So let's wrap this up with some final thoughts. Ryan, you lead us off, Andy, and then I'll close it down.
I never really loved playing Ohio State, but that game cannot get here fast enough. Let's just hope these guys, there's not really much to say. Let's just hope these guys learn something from tonight and we don't see this happen again. Maybe Wisconsin will be one we could fear this happening again to, but I don't see another game on the schedule that sets up to be that lopsided. So, let's just hope these guys learn and move on and put this in the rearview mirror and bounce back.
Mr. Bottoms?
Yeah, I think one thing that, as we look at a team that's going to have to play small more often than not, I certainly, I think the thoughts of needing to play April and Priller, as you said, are probably frightening enough on their own. But I think in a team that is going to have to play small, they've pretty much shown at this point, Holt and Perea are not going to play much together. It looks like in some of Green's postgame comments, he even said Perea is going to be in a dogfight to keep his position based on how Holt has played, at least a couple things that I put up there. Who knows? The way Twitter's working, that could have been from 2 games ago, but it appears to at least be from tonight, as far as I can tell.
You sure that's not from back in the Louisville game?
It's hard to say. I don't know. But I think one of the things that you always worry about, to me, when you know you're going to play smaller, is toughness. Where do you get that toughness from when you don't have the big guys, the enforcers, whatever you want to call it, inside that are consistently there? And I think tonight's game calls that into question a bit. How much are some of these guys going to fight? The second half ended up pretty even, but that first half lead got up to 30 pretty fast in the second half. And I know, Jerod, you and I texted back and forth where it was like you weren't seeing a whole lot of fight out there. And that doesn't have anything to do with executing your offense or doing whatever. That's effort, as you guys mentioned. And I think that, as you look through things from tonight, those are the kinds of things that concern me more than a loss. To some extent, it's easy to say, oh, a 2-point loss and a 20-point loss, they're really not that different. I think based on the way some guys played tonight and just the overall level of toughness that seemed to be there, I think this is certainly not time to sound the alarm by any means, by the same token that you don't jump into the Nebraska game and say, oh, this team's going to go undefeated in the Big Ten. You don't jump on this game and say they're not going to win another game the rest of the way. But I do think it at least gives more specific things to look at going forward that aren't kind of the easy things to look at, like rebounding and shooting and whatever. Like I said, those things are at this point, we're 15 games into the season, whatever it is. Pretty well known what this team's deficiencies are from a skill standpoint, and what they're deficient, and what things they do well from a skill standpoint. I think what remains to be seen is the some of the mentality and the toughness and things like that. So I think the Ohio State game will be a good test for that. That's typically a team that plays tough defensively and will put up a challenge. And I think that's really what I'm most looking forward to see, because at some point, one of the 2 things we've seen thus far this season in the Big Ten is going to become a trend. One of those was this team responded really well against Nebraska, and one of them was tonight that really didn't respond well at all to the situation and the way that the game started out. So, it's kind of a tie 1-1 of how this team responds to that kind of, getting punched in the mouth and things like that, and we'll certainly find out on Saturday what that looks like going forward. So those to me are the things I'm the most concerned about. To answer one of the tweets, I don't know that this kind of loss, if this kind of loss becomes the norm, then yeah, I'm concerned. But time will tell what kind of loss this is. This is easily the worst loss in terms of just competitiveness and the way that they played as you look back to the season.
Yeah, I mean, Michigan State just came out and knocked the fight right out of us, and the guys didn't respond. Matthew Zimmerman on Twitter says, pre-Zeller IU squad sometimes played as if they had just met. Why was tonight's first half a flashback to that? And it's because this team was forced to play away. It hasn't played all year. I mean, they got smacked in the mouth, didn't respond as they have, and they looked different. They were finally forced to play a different game instead of dictating the tempo, and they didn't respond well to it at all. And it's concerning, certainly, because you never want to have a game like this, but also kind of with the caveat that the one place where this can really happen to you is at Michigan State, coming off a loss. They're just going to be, like mad hornets out there, and that's what happened, and Indiana didn't respond. And the key will be how they come back now. How does Indiana now rebound from this? A couple more comments from Ben Waymuth. Lack of field goal percentage obvious, inability to attack the hedges off the dribble painful. We talked about that. Michigan State just forced Indiana into doing things offensively we haven't seen from them. MSU bigs didn't allow our guards to corner and get to lane. Lack of penetration plus bad field goal percentage, perfect storm. And this was a perfect storm. And, Balcony Seats, our good friend Balcony Seats says, our game-changing bigs, Cody Zeller and Noah Vonleh, were 7 foot, 6'10". Dare I say we will be in similar situation next year. Biggest guy at 6'8", and Juwan. And I want to use that as my jumping-off point for the final thought because, it's way too early to start thinking about next year. Again, was the optimism after the Nebraska loss a little bit too high? Well, based on tonight's evidence, yes. But, it also stands to reason that how low we feel and kind of the dejection, the negativity, this may be a low point for that too. And where this team ultimately ends up is likely to be at some kind of equilibrium point between this. And, if a tough, hard-fought win on the road at Nebraska is a really good sign for this team, and just getting your doors blown off at Michigan State is a really bad sign, we have to hope that equilibrium falls closer to the side of Nebraska, being able to win tough, hard-fought games on the road. And I think we'll find out a lot about this team Saturday. A good Ohio State team, a top 25 team, a talented team that can play with some toughness and plays some good defense. They're coming into Assembly Hall. How does this team come out and respond? How do they protect home court? How do they rebound from this really poor game? How does Hunter Mosquera-Pereira respond? He's responded pretty well at times this year. After the Pitt game when it looked like Emmett Holt was getting ready to take the starting position and just run with it, Hunter responded with some good play. When he's been challenged, he's come back. You hope that he doesn't have to keep being challenged and find some consistency, but he hasn't yet. Troy Williams, Chad Ford, has him rated as one of his top 10 small, NBA draft prospect small forwards today, and, he goes out and puts out a game like this. So we've seen a lot better from Troy. We've come to expect more from Troy than what he did tonight, and I'm choosing to trust what I've seen over the last 4, 5, 6 games as opposed to just this one. But whether or not that trust is well placed, we will start to find out on Saturday. So with that said, you're not going to find many positives in tonight, but think back over the first 15 games, look at some of the positives that have happened with this team. Think about those. Let those comfort you on this cold winter night when nothing went right for Indiana. And let's look forward to Saturday, and hopefully we get a different result. Because at the end of the day, if Indiana can win at home against Ohio State, which, as Andy said, they should do, they need to hold serve, Indiana starts out this treacherous 3-game stretch of Big Ten games 2-1. So, as bad as it looked tonight, a tough, hard-fought win on Saturday, Indiana's sitting at 2-1 and in really good position, and that's right there for the taking if the guys are ready. If they come out and play like they did tonight, they're not going to be ready. They're not going to win that game. But if they come out and play like we've seen them play in previous games, then they will. I'm hoping that's the IU team that we'll see. We'll find out on Saturday. To everybody who listened live tonight, thank you very much. If you've been listening on the podcast, thank you as well. And make sure you go to assemblycall.com/scribe and get on our email list. Our number of email subscribers has actually quadrupled since the season began. It's because everybody loves the post-game email with Andy's lineup analysis. and all the other stuff that we put in there. So it only goes in the email newsletter. We don't put it on the blog. So make sure you get on the email list, again, assemblycall.com/subscribe. All right, everybody. Have a good, well, you're not going to have a good night. Just have a night, get through it, and get through the rest of your week, and we'll talk to you on Saturday after IU Ohio State. Take care, everybody.